What is something you were surprised to find while going through a person's belongings after they passed away? A handwritten letter from the then King of Jordan. My granddad found it during World War II, kept it in a keepsakes box along with old ration books and his dead wife's driving license. That letter's gonna be in a museum or something 100 years from now. My husband passed last July. I was going through his accordion file where he put all of his important papers trying to find his cart title. I found an envelope that I had written my name and number on the first day we met. He kept it in his accordion file under very important documents this whole time. It made me cry. My condolences for your loss. I can't help but think how amazing that your husband loved you so much to keep that envelope for all those years. He was the most amazing man I could have ever asked for. Thank you for your kind words. After my grandma suddenly passed away when I was 12, my family and I had been organizing her things. There, we found a somewhat heavy bag. When we opened it, I was very moved to see she had kept many of the toys I had played with as a child. I was very touched by this, but decided to give some life back to those toys and handed them to my little cousins. Less surprised, but when my grandfather died I was helping clean out his room. All his children had already gone through and claimed what they wanted to remember him by. On his desk were trinkets, like a foreign coin, an old picture of my grandmother, etc. No one wanted these, but they must have meant something to him. And now they don't mean anything to anyone. It was sad. I took them and put them in a small container and put that in my old stuff box I have in the basement that is just stuff I can't bring myself to throw away. Lost my wife to a drunk driver. The day after the funeral, I managed to get access to her phone and found out that she had been cheating on me all through our marriage. I completely got over her in record time. Man, that must be so terrible. How do you manage to get access to a spouse's phone? Like, I don't expect Apple or Google just turns over the access to a survivor. Did you have to buy some hacking software or? At least I know with the carrier. If you can prove you are married and that the previous owner is deceased via a death cert, they certainly will hand over access to the phone. At least they did when my late wife passed away from cancer. Google has an inactive account manager. If I am inactive for 60 days, my wife gets an email and will be able to access my account. Lost my dad last year. I was very surprised at how many sentimental things he kept. He wasn't a total hard ass, but I never thought of him as sentimental. He still had a letter his mother had written to him when he joined the Navy, some toys/trinkets that I gave him when I was a child. Yeah, I know this feeling. What prompted me to ask this question was that years ago when I was clearing out my mom's stuff, I found a list of professions. It was the list we made together when I was deciding what to study further when I was 15. I can't believe she kept it. Still makes me smile to know that she did. My dad wrote me a letter in college based on the recommendation of the orientation leaders. He said some things I took mild offense at the time, i.e. I doubt this friend group will last, but this other group of people seems like it will become lifelong friendships. I saved it. I read it 10 years later and he was spot on. He knew me better than I knew myself at 18. Or maybe was just better at seeing the patterns. I lost my dad over 10 years ago, just after I turned 19. Shortly after his death I was going through his things and came across a letter hidden away in his sock drawer. I had written it to him when I was 12. I was an emotional prepubescent preteen and we had argued about something silly. I wrote him an angry letter about how I hated him and wished he would die. I could see where his tears had stained the paper and made the ink run. The letter itself was falling apart and looked like it had been read hundreds of times, like a favorite book. To be honest, I had completely forgotten that I had written that letter. When my dad died, he was my best friend, and I was his. Although not the intent at the time, my letter served a purpose far greater than anything I could have imagined. At first, I was heartbroken at the thought of him keeping the letter, and that he had obviously read it over many times. But now, it strangely makes me really happy that he took that shitty letter and let it bring us closer, rather than driving us apart further. Yesterday was his birthday. I miss him every day. My mom's cousin. She would never invite us, and so we never ate there, not even had a drink of water. She lived alone for most of her life, never married, never had kids, and with no real friends. She helped my grandmother take care of my mom when she was sick, so my mom returned the favor by helping her through the years. After she died, we cleaned up the house. She had so much stuff. What was interesting is that she has at least 6 complete really expensive dish set. Never been used, covered in dust. With lots of cutlery. It was a pain in the ass to pack. I still wonder why she bought so much dishes when she wouldn't want anyone in her house. When my grandfather passed, we found in a box hidden in an old closet all the love letters my grandmother and him exchanged before they got married. I'm glad we found them. When my granddad died, we found the letters between him and my grandmom from when they were young. My grandmom was only 14 when she got pregnant, grandpa was 16 I think, and she was sent away to have the baby while her family tried to insist they send the kid, my dad, away for adoption. In those letters they talked about how much they loved each other, and how they were fighting to keep the baby. My grandpa was working extra hours to save money, and spending any free time he had making furniture for their future home. He wrote about how the boys at work all made fun of him for being so under my grandmom's thumb, but he didn't care because he loved her and their unborn baby. I think it really helped my dad feel more like he was wanted, as he always grew up feeling like he ruined their lives. When my grandpa died, we found a trove of pictures of his other family while he was stationed in Korea. Found trove of similar pictures when my husband returned from Vietnam. Often wondered how his child fared after war ended. When my grandfather died, we found 3 separate briefcases in his loft. Briefcase 1, around $20,000 in it. Briefcase 2, around $50,000 in it. Briefcase 3, documentation and photo ID for different names but my grandfather's face. My dad and uncle finished the clear-out process by themselves and have never told me if they found anything else or what they did with the briefcases. Your grandfather was either into some heavy spy type shit, a con man, or just really into a good joke. Ha 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 ha. I imagine the grandpa like, hey, I wish I could see the look on their faces. He's not really dead. He's in Berlin. That's where he stashed the chandelier. Last year, the guy I've always thought of as my fat neighbor died. His wife had a garage sale, and I was shocked to find out that all of his shirts fit me perfectly. I started a diet that same day, and I'm back down to a normal BMI. I found a really spooky diary at my great-aunt's house. It had entries like, I killed the neighbor just now, and your mother was the victim today. Needless to say, my wee aunt is unlikely to have killed anyone, or to have been so nonchalant about it, so it must be code for something, but for what? Maybe a wish fulfillment journal. Write out the frustration fantasies to cope with conflict instead of reacting in person. Well, if that's what kept her from ending us all, then I owe that creepy little diary. My oldest uncle killed himself years ago. He was depressed, paranoid and mentally ill. When my mom, his sister, went to his home, she found multiple dictionaries in different languages. He was working like park guardian in Paris, and so he learned a lot of languages to help people. He even had a complete collection of all Alexander Dumas books. He may have been terribly alone all his life, driving him totally crazy. But I assume he also traveled all around the world, and in time, in his mind. May he found peace. Perhaps not crazy, but it was somewhat surprising. My grandfather wasn't really in our lives. He was abusive towards our grandmother, and when they divorced he moved across the country and became a truck driver. Growing up, my mother never really saw him, and the one time she did he was sober but admitted his dry humor made it hard to talk to him. However, when my sister and I were born, she put an effort to send him pictures and Christmas cards. Throughout his life he never talked to her or reached out and assumed he just never cared and we were on better relations with his brother anyway. However, in October of 2018 he ended up passing away and my mother came up to help his grieving brother sort through my grandfather's things. She ended up finding every wall covered in our baby photos and cards we sent him throughout the years along with the few our aunts and uncles sent him. My mother became so heartbroken because throughout her entire life she assumed he hated his past or just disliked us, but he probably just didn't know exactly how to interact with us. I was asked to help clean out my friend's grandmother's house after her death since the family was planning funeral and none wanted to go to her apartment without her. I expected little glass teacups and doilies. You know, old lady stuff. No, she had a tactical army knife on her coffee table, survival gear in the closet, books on war and maritime adventures on her bookshelf, sports gear, really old Wonder Woman comics, and a bunch of cool unexpected stuff. Made me wish I'd met her before she went. She must have been so fun. Maybe not so much of a surprise per se, but the closet in my mother's old room was completely full of plastic grocery bags that Grandma had been saving. My mom made a braided rug with them as a gag gift and it's still around. The bigger surprise was how much of their wealth had been donated to charities. They lived such a simple life you'd never know they had that amount of money to begin with. What do you think about the fact that many belongings remain after death? Leave a comment. And subscribe to this channel if you want to see more same videos.